the 1950s when the story of the White Lady of Balete Drive started to spread in Metro Manila. And maybe it started back in 1973. So before I even started writing Trece, I already loved reading about ghost stories and paranormal experiences and supernatural events. And in one of my researches, there was an article that came out in the Daily Express back in 1973 about a house in Parañaque, in Merville, which supposedly was a haunted house. Now, according to the report, if you ever get to read it, a couple had just moved into the house with the rest of their family and their newborn baby, or their baby was around 5 to 6 months old. And when they moved into the house, everything was fine. But then strange things started to happen in the house. Lights would switch on and off by themselves. They would hear voices coming from empty rooms. One time, one of the people from the household woke up looking for his slippers, and when he couldn't find it, he looked down the corridor and saw his slippers was walking away by themselves. Now, all of these things started to happen to everyone in the household except for the mother of the 6-month-old baby. And she didn't believe any of the stories that was being told to her until one summer afternoon, she was giving a bath to her baby. So she just got the baby out of the tub. She was drying up her baby, wrapped it in towels, and then she turned around to get clothes for the baby. And when she looked at the baby again, half of the child's face had wrinkled up, looking like the face of an old man. And the baby's eye had turned to that dark color of gray that you normally see when the sky is about to have a storm. And that's when she realized that all of the stories she's been hearing all these weeks about the strange things happening in the house was real. She suddenly realized that her baby had been possessed by the ghost of the house. And the first thing that she could think of doing was she slapped her baby. She slapped her baby and commanded the spirit to leave the child's body. But the thing on the bed didn't cry. It just stared back at her as if daring her do it again. And that's when she got down on her knees and she started to pray. And according to the report, she prayed for the longest time, calling on all the saints until finally the baby returned to normal. If you do find that report, you will discover that the name of the father in that household was Buddy Tan. The name of the mom was Adjet Tan. And the name of the baby is Budget Tan. So that was my childhood. How was your childhood? So, yes, that's a true story. This is a story that I've heard my mom tell me and our friends and relatives as I was growing up, right? So, normal babies have stories of, I'm sure your parents will say, oh, when Jiro was a baby, he was so cute, he did this thing. My mom would say, oh, when Budget was a baby, he was possessed by a ghost of our house, right? And for me, I thought, oh, this must be normal, right? And to make matters more interesting, it was my dad who told me stories about the aswang. I remember being as a kid, I didn't want to go to sleep. And my dad said, if you don't come to bed, there's an aswang outside the window and he's going to eat you if you don't come to bed right now. And then my mom was the one who said, oh, we used to live in a haunted house. We moved out of the house, thankfully. By the time I could walk and talk, we were not living in that house anymore. And it was my mom who said, oh, we used to live in a house where there was a ghost and it possessed you. And eventually, when I grew up in the 80s, in the 1980s, and I could read, this was the type of headline I would see in the tabloid, right? That there was, manananggal, frightened, sampalok folk. And, I didn't know, for me, I didn't know what a tabloid was. I just knew that, oh, it's a newspaper. This is the news. It must be true, right? I didn't have the concept of fake news back then. And yeah, this was there were like manananggal stories and movies, and I saw the manananggal in TV shows. So again, if you put yourself in my shoes, I'm growing up in Metro Manila where there's aswang outside, there's multo inside, and there's manananggal all over the place. So when people ask me what inspired Trece, I would like to say it's childhood trauma, right? But it's also inspired by really just growing up in Metro Manila, right? Growing up, it just felt like a magical place where there were these creatures and beings that you couldn't see. So when you've got aswang, multo, manananggal, who are you gonna call, right? Who are you gonna call for help? Well, when I was a kid, I was a big Batman fan. I love Batman. I still do. He's my favorite superhero. Yes, we could have called the Ghostbusters as well. When I was in college, that's when I discovered John Constantine, Hellblazer. Some of you might have seen the Keanu Reeves movie or have seen him in the TV show. But if you remember, John Constantine is a detective as well, but he uses magic to stop the demons that are possessing people and doing diabolical things in the city of London. After college, I became a fan of the X Files. It's making a comeback, so it's time to rewatch these episodes. So the lead character, one of the lead characters of X Files, is Fox Mulder, and he's an FBI agent along with Dana Scully, and he investigates crimes that involve supernatural, paranormal stuff, and aliens. And then in the 2000s, I became a fan of CSI. So I don't think CSI, it finally ran out of versions. There was CSI Vegas, then it became CSI Miami, then it became CSI New York. I don't think they ever did CSI Manila. We had Soko. But Gil Grissom was a scientist, right? So he approached things from the lens of a scientist. He solved crime by doing scientific experiments. So these were the things I grew up with, right? So in 2005, when Kadjo said, Budge, gawa tayo ng comics, I dug up an old script about, because I've always wanted to write about a detective who investigated supernatural crime, but I wanted it set in Manila. And then I sent Kadjo a script, and it wasn't even finished. It was like half a script. And this is what Kadjo sent me, right? This is actually the very, very first sketch of Trece. And this is the sample page where I just said, okay, draw Trece fighting an aswang. And this is what Kadjo drew. And then, as much as this was like a really awesome drawing, seeing it coming from Kadjo, I just thought, why does it feel like why does this guy look familiar, right? What is it about this guy that reminds me so much of my other favorite heroes? And I thought, do we really need another tough guy solving crime, fighting bad guys in Metro Manila. And I thought, what have we not seen? What haven't we seen that much, for that matter? So I texted Kajo and I said, what if we make Trece a woman? And Kajo said, oh, that would make Trece more badass, is what he said. And on the same day, he sends me this sketch, right? And a little trivia that the artwork on the right side, that was the original version of the kambal. That's how they were supposed to look like. So this was 2005, and I said, all right, this is it. This is what Trece should look like. I think she looks awesome. And Kajo finished. I finally finished the script. I sent him half a script. I finished the script in, I don't know, a week or 2 weeks, and then Kajo finished the entire issue in 20 days. So like in a month, we got to finish the first issue of Trece. And then and yeah, it was like and this was an artwork that Kajo later drew, right? And back then me and Kajo, before getting to Trece, me and Kajo had done our own separate comic book project. So in effect, this was like our first collaboration. And I did comics. I've been doing comics since 1994, 1995, and this is now 2005, right? So a lot of the comics I made didn't sell. I lost money. I invested my own money in my comics, and all of those comics didn't sell. So when we did Trece, I just told Kanjo, hey, let's do this for fun. We're not going to print 1,000 copies. Let's just photocopy it. So nagpa-Xerox lang kami ng comics back then. And we sold it for 30 pesos. Right? I knew my friend was running Comic Quest in Mega Mall. If you guys ever pass by that area, and I said, I've got this comic. Trivia was when I sent Kajo the original script for Trece, the Kambal were supposed to wear the same masks. And I was thinking, oh, it would be cool if they were wearing skull masks or something like that. And then Kajo was the one who said, oh, you know what would be more badass? If they were wearing the masks of tragedy and comedy from the theaters. But he then redesigned it, right? It doesn't look like the traditional comedy and tragedy masks from theater. And he found a way to make the Kambal unique. So, how do we make the story? Just to show you a little behind the scenes of what happens when me and Kajo collaborate in a typical issue of Trece. This is how it normally starts. A typical issue of Trece is roughly 20 pages long, and then it becomes longer as me and Kajo edit it or like add to it, right? So I make a list, right, of 1 to 20 pages, and then I start to fill it up, right? What happens in each page. And sometimes I would already know how it ends, and sometimes I don't. So for example, in this case, pages 1 to 7 is her discovering the crime. Pages 7 to 10 is her investigating the crime. Pages 12 to 16 is her finally discovering who is the one who did it. And then pages 18 to 20 shows you how she solves the crime or how the crime gets resolved. And for some of you who have read Trece, sometimes you know that Trece doesn't always get to capture or solve the crime, right? Or sometimes she solves it, but the creature gets away or gets destroyed. And then the other thing I do is I sketch it out like this, right? Once I have that list of what happens in the 20 pages, I then draw up the pages. And this is for my sake, right? I don't show this to Kajo. This is really for me to understand what happens from page 1 to page 2. What pages are the most important when you open the book, what pages are together. So as you can see, page one is what you normally see on the right hand side of the book. And then when you open the book, that's usually page 2 and 3, 4 and 5, 6 and 7, so on and so forth. Because then you would know what is the reader seeing once he's opened that book, right? And that would also help you figure out, oh, this is a good time to have a double page spread, and Kanjo can draw some really awesome, fight scene that spans from page left to right page. So once I've mapped out the pages, again, I can just go back, and this allows me to figure out, do I have enough pages to do an intro, to show the investigation, to show a fight scene, and so on and so forth. So here's an example of a script. This is the actual script from 13 issue 1, right? So this is what Kanjo receives. And again, the interesting thing about comic book script writing is that there is no one format. Versus, for example, writing a script for a TV show or a movie or a play, there is a standard format that it follows. And what you'll see is that a comic book script borrows a lot of ingredients or styles from other scripts. But some comic book writers can spend a whole page just describing one panel. Like, for example, this panel, there's a comic book writer known as Alan Moore, and he can spend a whole page, a whole bond paper just describing this one panel. So Kajo gets this script, and it's up to him to interpret, right? So I can just say page one, panel one, it's nighttime, show that we're on Balete Drive, and maybe we can see the street sign. Panel two, show a dead body on the ground, it's the white lady. Panel three, we see a man looking like he's in a state of shock and panic because he's the guy who just ran over the lady. Panel 4, we see two policemen standing near the body. Tapia is a geeky looking fellow wearing glasses. Guerrero looks like Commissioner Gordon with a beer belly. He looks like the kind of cop that's seen it all and just wants to retire. And then I put in dialogue. Sergeant Tapia says, "Do we take away the body?" Captain Guerrero says, "No, not yet. She's on her way." And yes, as you can clearly see, I am a Batman fan, and even Captain Guerrero was modeled after Commissioner Gordon, except he likes San Miguel beer compared to Commissioner Gordon. So I write up the script. Kajo sends me this page without all of the words in it. And then I look at the page and I go, what's missing? And what can I add? And that's when I bring in either captions or dialogue or rewrite the script. Right. So in the first panel, that's where I decided to write caption: the night wind howls like a wounded, dying animal. So that's when I think, and in the second panel, it continues. One might think the street was mourning this particular death. So why did I decide to do that? Since the comic book is on a 2D format, right? It's not a video. Then I try to think what other information can I give the reader that they won't get since they're not watching this or listening to this, right? It's not a podcast, it's not a video. So I could have described the street and I could have said 12 midnight on Balete Drive, a woman in white was found dead on the street. But then I would just be describing what's already on the page, right? So you don't want to put in redundant information. And since it's on a 2D flat format, then I thought, how can I make the reader imagine what was the feeling of standing on that street? So I describe what was the sound that you were hearing if you were on that street. And I also tell you that it was very windy. So it gives you an immediate impression that it was very chilly that night, right? And that this is something tragic when I say one might think the street was mourning this particular death. So just again, my thought process was process on how do I help enhance this page that will help the reader enter this world of Trece and make them understand this is different from their everyday world. So, going back to the 1950s, the story of the Balete Drive, if you're talking to your parents and grandparents, some of them will say that they've heard of these stories way back, and every decade it seems to survive. And it's interesting how it feels like there's always some member of your family or a friend of a friend that encountered the white lady, right? So that's how much this urban myth has spread. So when I was finally, growing up again, as like more and more people I encountered would tell me their versions of the White Lady of Balete Drive, it just made me wonder who is the White Lady or who was the White Lady of Balete Drive? Where did she come from? And why she's haunting that particular street, right? Why is she only seen on Balete Drive? So when I started to write the first issue of Trece, that's where I thought, okay, I will try and answer this for myself, and Trece will be my detective who will find out all these things about the White Lady. So let me now read to you a couple of pages from at the intersection of Balete and 13th Street. The night wind howls like a wounded, dying animal. One might think the street was mourning this particular death. And we see a man standing in shock right beside a car that just crashed against a wall. And we can see the shocked look of the lady in white down on the ground. Two policemen are standing near the dead body, and the younger one says, "Do we take away the body now?" The older one says, "No, not yet. Wait, she's on her way." "Sir, the Soko already collected all the important evidence," said the younger one. "Good evening, Captain Guerrero. Thanks for calling me," says a woman in black. "Hello, Alexandra. I had the feeling you'd want to see this for yourself." Of course, it's not every day a white lady is found dead, especially on this street. "So, what do you know so far?" "Looks like your typical automobile accident until one of the neighbors identified the victim. Her name was Gina Santos. And the neighbors said, as far as they remember, she died back in the 1960s. "Interesting," says Trece. "What's this?" And she bends down to see this white dust on the street, picks it up, gives it a taste, and says, "Salty. Seems like we're missing the bigger picture here," she says. And that's when she realizes that someone had drawn a circle at the intersection using that salty substance. Guerrero says, "And it seems like, as usual, you're the only one who has a clue on what this is all about." "Actually, I don't, but I'll look into it," says Trece. "Thanks," says Guerrero. Trece walks down the street until she finds this mound of dirt, and she says, "Tabi tabi po. Good evening po." "Psst, nobody stays there anymore. Not a good place to stay. Always lots of litter, garbage. Not good at all." "Good evening, sir. Can I ask you some questions?" "Depends who's asking. My name is Alexandra Trece, and you're Anton Spawn. Okay, what do you want to know?" Did you see what happened here tonight?" No. I try not to get involved in such things." "This was on the street. Do you know what this is?" "Hmm." "It's mermaid. The bones of a mermaid ground to dust. dust. Fine, very useful if one wants to trap spirits. Highly recommended. Better than iodized salt. And where does one find ground up mermaid bones? Sorry, I wouldn't know, not my territory. I don't like the sea so much. That would be a good place to start. The sea. Good night, little Trece. Careful where you tread. And the manhole clinks back into the ground. And so, going back to the outline I just showed you earlier, that's the first 6 pages, right? And as you can see, when I initially wrote it, I just wrote it as find the white lady, introduce Trece, discover the clue, begin investigation, meets the Nuno. Nuno gives her clue. That's all you need to know at the beginning of your story. And then when you go, once you finish the outline, then you can go back and add details like, you know, describing what the manhole looks like, describing how the Nuno looks like. Kajo was the one, and again, this is how the collaboration with your partner, whoever it is, right? Whether you're collaborating with one person or 5 people, Kajo was the one who came up with the idea of making the manhole the hat, right? Originally, I had just imagined he was like Oscar the Grouch, coming out of the manhole, and he's like a creature. But Kajo came up with the brilliant idea of making the manhole the hat. So we're done with the first 6 pages. What happens in the next couple of pages? Again, we show Trece investigating, talking to her contacts, which leads her to meeting the aswang in one of the bars. And again, this is one of those moments where I would normally write, Trece meets the aswang, kick-ass fight scene, and Kajo is the one that choreographs and thinks of, how awesome does this fight scene happen. And then I come in to put in the words afterwards. And then she investigates, and as you know, Trece uses magic to investigate crime. She needs to see what the aswang saw. She needs to see the face of who the aswang dealt with. And since the aswang wasn't talking, she gets her magic dagger, her kris. She plucks out the eye of the aswang, and then she puts it in a glass of water, mixes it up, says a magic word, and then a face appears in the water in the glass, right? And that's how she discovers, oh, this must be my suspect. This must be the one that killed the white lady of Balete Drive. Going back to the outline, then it covers all of these things that I wrote of like what happens from page to page, how does Trece get to the next part of the story, which leads us to the prime suspect, which is this lady who lives on Balete Drive, who then tells the story why she plotted revenge against the white lady. And then, of course, she couldn't get arrested for killing a ghost, but the underworld and the supernatural finds a way to seek justice, right? And her house accidentally, air quotes, accidentally burns down to the ground. And when Trece comes back to the crime scene, she then looks to the street corner and discovers there's a new white lady of Balete Drive. And it's the woman who killed the white lady of Balete Drive. So it seems like in this street, it will always find someone to become the new ghost of the street. And that was our first story. And that covers, again, all the 20 pages, right? So that was 2005. By 2007, me and Kajo were attending Comic Con in UP. That's me and Kajo. I had more hair back then. Kajo decided to go for the mohawk look back then. And as you can see on the table, we were still selling our 30 peso 13 back then. But in 2008, that's when we met Nida Ramirez from Vizprint, which is now called Avenida. We pitched to her Trece, and she gladly, thankfully accepted Trece. And 2008 was when the first Trece book came out. And in 2000, and we kept on making more books with Nida. 2009 was when we won our first National Book Award. So that's Kadjo and our publisher Nida. And we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her, trusting our story and seeing the potential in our story. And it was also in 2009 when we met Tanya Yuson. Tanya Yuson is the executive producer and the head writer of the Trece anime. And it was way back in 2009 when she got to read the Trece books. And she approached us and said, do you want to turn this into a movie? And that was the original plan for Trece. So, cut to 10 years later. So, yes, it took Tanya and her partner, Shanti Harmain, an Indonesian movie producer, 10 years of pitching Trece to different studios in the Philippines, in Asia, in Europe, and in America. And finally, it was 2019 when Netflix opened their doors and said, we're looking for stories that can be turned into anime. And even though the original plan for Trece was a live action movie, they reformatted the pitch, presented it to Netflix, and that's how it became a Netflix show, right? That's the short version. So, as you can see, starting from 2005 with this sketch to 2019 when the team started to do the anime sketches and versions of Trece, was when it all got kicked off, right? When we got the green light from Trece. And of course, in 2021 was when some of you may have seen this all over the city. These were the billboards and some of the ads that they ran for promoting Trece when it first came out during the pandemic. And these are the people that made it possible, right? On the left, you have Shanti, who is also the producer. Jojo is our head of art, and Jay Oliva, of course, is the director and producer as well of the show. And on the upper right hand corner, you'll see the writing team along with, of course, Liza Soberano. So Mick and Zig are part of Tanya's writing team. And at the bottom, of course, is Kanjo and Nida again. I just wanted to say that the whether it was the Xerox version to the book version to the anime version, it really helped that we found people who understood what Trece was all about, what we wanted to do with it, and how they allowed us the space to tell our story in our own way. And when they adapted it, when Tanya and Jay and the rest of the team adapted it, they stayed true to the vision of Trece, even though they needed to make changes to turn it into a moving format, right? Into a audio visual format. The next couple of pages is a book that I'm still working on, and this is for Trece, the Art of the Anime. In the book, it will talk about what I just talked about, which is how it started out as a comic book and how it became an animated series. You will see behind the scenes artwork like this for storyboards, as well as character art and even initial what do you call this, character design. So this is the emissary from of Lady Ibu, the goddess of death. The book will also show how the artwork from the anime was used for promoting the show. So the ad agency Gigil came up with this wonderful idea of putting Trece artwork all over the city. So this is the Chanak. It made it look like they were coming out of the wall. And my favorite is that they were able to put artwork near Balete Drive. Right, they were able to put the White Lady of Balete Drive artwork and this what do you call this announcement that Trece is coming on Balete Drive. So it just felt like we're coming back to full circle where the story that inspired us to start Trece gets launched also in a way in Balete Drive. So those are the magic ingredients that helped me and Kanjo create Trece. Um, remember stuff from your home, remember stuff from your childhood. Think about the stuff that you're afraid of. Don't shy away from your folklore and think, oh, that's just what old people talk about. Think about your heroes and think about finding people who will go with you on this journey. So take the stuff that you were afraid of as you were a kid and use that to tell a story. And in my case, I took what I was afraid of and created a character who can fight back and fight those fears. I took my old heroes and gave it my own spin, right? I didn't just come out and make Paniki Man fights Aswang, right? That would have been, uh, I don't know how many people would have bought Paniki Man. But my point is, then it didn't feel original. But there's no harm in taking your favorite hero, but how do you personalize it? How do you make it more Pinoy? Or in your case, how do you make it more Cebuano? How do you make it, more Caviteño? Maybe there's something there. Maybe there's something that will make it just very different, but it's still based on your favorite hero. Whether it's a superhero or a manga hero or a real life hero for that matter. And lastly, finding people who are on whether they're on your same wavelength, or sometimes you find partners who you completely disagree with, but somehow when you put your ideas together, you actually come up with amazing stuff. That you find people who want to work with you, collaborate with you, that you find mentors. It's also good to find somebody who you look up to, you trust their judgment. You can show the stuff and you're not afraid when they tell you that it's bad, right? That they can be honest with you. Um, and eventually that if you're lucky enough, that these collaborators and mentors of yours become your friends. I hope that you are ready for your magical quest and that you find the magical ingredients that are important to tell your story. Thank you very much for listening to my story.
Thank you so much po, Sir Tan. Sabi yung camera ko. Ayun. Thank you so much, Mr. Tan. I'm pretty sure I speak for everyone here when I say na that's probably one of the most interesting and um, one of the best talks they've heard.
Thank you very much.
I'm sure some of the participants here have some questions. Guys, you can use this time to ask Mr. Tan about for some few questions. You can type them in the chat box and I'll read it for you. Or if you're more comfortable with raising your hands, you may do so. Question from Jeffrey, sir. Kailan ka ba po nagsimula? Sabi niya.
Oh, I started making my first comic book when I was a kid, right? I mean, comics was one of those things na pasalubong sa akin ng mommy at daddy ko. When I was a kid, we would go to Green Hills. And if I wanted to buy a toy, usually pahirapan yun, right? I have to cry. I have to cry to convince them to get a toy for me. But if I wanted the book, when we'd go to National Bookstore, they would always it was a easy, they would always say yes to a book. So comics was where I started. I made my first comic book when I was maybe 10 years old. I got a bunch of like scrap paper and then put them together. I stapled it, made a comic book. Of course I could only make one comic book. And then nilagay ko sa cover, 25 centavos. And then I sold it to my mom. So she gives me 25 centavos. She reads the comic book. And then after she read it, I got the comic book. Then I went to my dad. And I sold it to him for 25 centavos. So I can say, as a 10-year-old, sold out yung comics ko. Um, but yeah, I think ever since then, I was thankful to meet my barkada in grade school. That's where I learned other comic books. I mean, that there are other, comic book titles out there. In high school was when I met Bo Guerrero, JB Tapia, the people I still collaborate with. And we started our first comic books back in the 90s. So yeah, it's been I've loved making comics ever since I was a kid.
Yun. Next, let's take John Marco. John Marco's question. Open mic.
So question for you, Sultan. So very big fan of Trece universe. I have collected most of the books of Trece. So personally, they have met also Sir Kajo the art for this. The other thing that I want to ask is about how you were able to expand the Trece universe without it degrading the first seven books or the original book series of Trece because I've also read the Trece Bloodlines and the stories of Trece's sisters and brothers and siblings po. So the question is, paano mo po ba na expand or na papalawak yung universe po ng Trece?
Yep. Thanks, Gianmarco. Nice question. Um, how did me and Kajo expand the Trece universe, and still keep it true to Trece, right? Um, I guess the simple answer is we did it step by step, issue by issue. I have fellow writers and friends who are also making their own comic book, and some of them they love the world building part. Some of my friends write out the whole world before they even start writing a single page of a script, and that's a fine, that's their style. But I like doing things. I like to be a bit more spontaneous, and work on stuff that interests me at the moment, right? So for example, let's take Trece. After we had done issue one, and I love to tell the story that I told Kadjo, we both have day jobs. We both work in an ad agency na parati tayo may OT. How can we ever finish this comic book? And Kadjo said, give me a 20-page script. I'll finish it in 20 days. And after 20 days, he finished the script and he goes, where's your next script? And that's when I realized, ooh, this might work. So I just made a list of like what other creature do I want Trece to encounter, right? So in my initial list, I just wrote Tikbalang, Chanak, and then I wrote Darna, right? For those of you who have read book one, you know what I'm talking about. Um, and I didn't jump to like expanding that world immediately. In every issue of Trece, that's where I try to expand the world. I try to always show the reader a part of Metro Manila that I have not shown before. And if I like the character, I'll go back and use that character. And when Trece in issue one, I didn't even know Trece had brothers, right? I didn't even know she was the sixth child of the sixth child. But by book two, or I think, yeah, around book two, people were starting to ask, right? Where's her father? What happened to them? And all of those things. And I think that's the moment I realized that Trece had brothers and a sister was I attended a baptism. Um, and while I was, while I was sitting there in the church watching the baptism happen, it then made me think, "Uy, sino nga ba talaga ang ninong at ninang ni Trece at sino yung mga nag-attend ng binyag niya, di ba? Um, and then, yeah, sorry. And then I remembered it was JB Tapia, who is the writer artist for Verdugo. He was the one who came up with uh, what if Trece was the sixth child of the sixth child? And that comes from an old folk tale that the seventh child of the seventh child is the lucky child, right? And I don't know if that's why our parents and grandparents kept having like big families kung naniniwala sila doon. But yeah, so then the thought of like, the sixth child of the sixth child, a child of possibilities and paradox, right, came to mind. Um, and that's when I started to think, okay, so I want to show the birth of Trece, the binyag of Trece, and if I need to say she's the sixth child of the sixth child, then I need to talk about who are her other siblings. And that's when I started to just ideate of like, if they are a family who investigates and the supernatural occurrences, what kind of brothers would she have? So I went through the archetypes of what have we normally seen in comics or in TV shows or movies, who normally investigates supernatural crime. So you have your monster hunter like Hellboy, you have your priest who does exorcisms, and then I thought, oh, a thief like a or an Indiana Jones type character, mashed up with a cat burglar type, would make for an interesting brother because he is, and then of course you have the scholar, right, the teacher. And then I needed a fifth one, and then I thought, oh, so maybe, and again going back to the first issue, I didn't even know that her dagger would eventually become her sister, right? And I just thought, what would be what would make Trece so different? So instead of making the sister, her twin sister, alive, then I thought the sister died and her soul got transformed into the blade, into the sinag. Um, and that all happened in the writing of number three. So if you ask me what's going to happen in book nine, the answer is I don't know, because then it's fresh for me, right? Then I get excited with I am also the first reader of Trece as I write it, right? So and maybe that's why I'm very late with book nine, but I am working on it. But yeah, that's my style. So again, like I said, some other writers love to research and map out stuff before writing anything. So that's my style, and doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way or the best way. I hope that answers your question.
That's a great answer po, sir. Now, question from Facebook Live viewer po, Mr. Nino Dizon Estolas. What makes your comic something only you could write instead of a remix of the stories you already love? Sabi niya po.
Ooh, good question. I'll tell you another story, then I'll try to answer that question. Right, many years ago, we had Paul Medina Jr. come to our ad agency, and he gave a talk about creating Pugad Baboy. And one of the questions to him was, "How do you know the comic strip you're writing is funny?" And he said, um, "Pag nagdo-drawing ako tapos nakangiti ako, alam kong masaya tong dinodrawing ko, di ba?" So sometimes it comes down to your gut feeling. And I think it's that, right? And again, let me go back to the example I just showed you. That when I first wrote Trece, he was the tough guy, naka-leather jacket, Kadjo came up with the devil's haircut back then. But the description wise, he was like square jawed, big body, leather jacket, can knock down any bad guy, even though he's like a 10 foot tall aswang. But looking at that, it just reminded me of other characters, right? So I think that's when I write. And I know, for example, that I am picking up stuff or getting inspiration or riffing off, am I doing my Sherlock Holmes story? Am I doing a Batman story? Am I doing my version of a Sandman story? Right? At a certain point na, kinopia ko lang to. Right? So, and that's what it felt like when I first saw the first version of Trece as a guy. It felt like parang kopya lang siya ng gawa ng iba. Right? So sometimes it's just a little change that, if you just flip it sometimes, all right, make the woman a man, right? Make the man a woman, right? Set it in Manila instead of Gotham City. Wala siyang Batcave, meron siyang bar. Mas cool yun dahil mas okay yung bar, di ba? Wala kang paniki, tsaka bat guano all over the place. Right? She doesn't have a butler, but she has a bartender. Right? So, I mean, you can, kung himayin mo ang 13, you can easily see how it's largely influenced by Batman, John Constantine, and the X-Files. But ultimately, it comes down to my gut feeling of, ay, kinopia ko lang pala yung napanood ko dun sa whatever, right? And when I realize it's just a copy of a copy, then then I need to say, how can I make this different, right? I guess my last example for that is when I originally wrote the story, The Tragic Case of Dr. Burgos, it was just a generic fire demon, right? When I first wrote the draft, it was man gets cursed by a fire demon. And I wrote the story with a fire demon in mind. And then I thought, well, a lot of American TV shows and fantasy books have the fire demon with the horns and it's on fire. And that's when research comes, right? Then I thought, is there a creature from Filipino folklore and myth that that can give curses with fire, right? And that's when I discovered the story of the Oriol. And the Oriol in the original folktale uh, normally manifests as a beautiful woman, and you find her by the river or a lake. And usually, when men find her, she's bathing, and of course, men are stupid and will go, "Hey, naked woman!" And they go straight into the water, and that's when she turns into a giant snake, and takes their soul. And there was one line in that book that I read, and she can breathe fire, right? A water snake that breathes fire. How unique is that? Then I had the problem of, if the Oriole is normally found in the body of water to lure men into the lake or river, where do I put her in Metro Manila? Right? Well, I can't put her in the Pasig River because no matter how beautiful she is, I don't think men will go rushing to her if she's bathing in the Pasig River, right? Then I thought, where else do men go? A massage parlor with a jacuzzi, right? And if you read the book, that's where she exactly is. She never leaves the jacuzzi. She just waits for the men to come. So by doing that, I take generic fire demon, make it more Pinoy, and I find a unique twist on, because I could have easily set it right in a river or at a beach, but the thought of there is this fantastic, deadly, magical creature hiding in a massage parlor that will give nightmares to a lot of men, I would suppose. Hope that was useful answer.
Um, let's take another question sa naka-raise hands po. Mr. Ice Maverick.
Good afternoon. Naririnig po ba?
Yep.
Okay. So, ang question ko po is, it's more of a writing type of question, parang writing tips. Do you have any doubts or do you tend to overthink with when writing Trece, with how you continue to write down yung plot of the story, kung ano yung maging yung susunod? And how can you proceed that over the next arc or ano, after finishing yung currently na ginagawa mo. Yung parang ganun type of ano, writing perspective.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Super good. I think that's another reason why book nine is delayed. I'm now at the overthinking stage. The outline really helps, right? I think um, doing the out, forcing myself to write the outline allows me to at least have something on the page that I can delete and rewrite. Because you're right, you do tend to overthink. And the problem with overthinking is if it's all in your head, then there's nothing for you to start to fix because it's all in your head right now. But once you have it on paper, then I can move stuff around and delete stuff. So as an example, I don't know if it might have been the Oriol story. It might have been the Dr. Burgos story. But there was a version of that where for example, Hank the bartender had more dialogue, he had more contribution to the action, and I showed more victims, more other victims getting killed, and Trece tracking them. And I think that helped me finish the story. So then I went over our usual 20-page count. Um, but at least I had 30 pages to work with, right? Having 30 pages is better than having no pages, and I'm just trying to think of the story in my head. So I know, for example, the common tool used by script writers for movies is they write the scenes on index cards, right? So my version is the list of 20 pages. Movie writers or script writers would write scenes on an index card and put it up on a board. So then they can take that index card which says Trece meets the Nuno. They can then take it and go, mas maganda to sa simula. Ay, hindi, baka mas maganda to sa huli. Write stuff down, I think, is my simplest solution to overthinking. Write down everything that you want to say in the story, whether it's a list or cards. Then, at least once it's written down, you have it physically in your hand and it's out of your head, right? And then you can start moving stuff around. You can throw it away. You can rip off the card and go, "Ay, pangit pala talaga to." But the point is, suddenly it's in your hands and it's something that you can physically work on. And I think honestly that, I mean, I know other writers would go straight to the computer and just type. I love to write stuff, still on paper, and that helps me get all of the overthinking out of my head and onto something physical, which I can then manipulate better. And then once I've trimmed that down to the 20 pages, then that's when I start typing. And even in the typing, that's when the rewriting happens. And it just streamlined the story for me when I start writing it.
Thank you very much po, sir.
So let's take last two questions before we proceed sa next since um in respect for Sir Budgettan's time. From Misha Borbe po. Misha, do you want to na lang open your mic to ask your question kasi nakita ko rin naka-raise hand ka rin pero meron ka rin dito sa chat box eh. So if you'd like to just open your mic to ask, sir. And the last question will be from Aikim. So prepare mo na lang yung question mo.
Yes, madami po akong tanong dyan sa chat box. Pero yung tanong ko po ngayon is yung how do you keep consistency po since nasabi niyo po yung ginagawa niyo po siya during the process na po talaga.
Sorry, can you ask that question again? How do I?
How do you keep yung consistency po sa story?
I think that's when how do I I honestly don't know if I am consistent in in the telling of the story. I think after book 3 there have been like, I think, Misha, my simple guideline is, does it still, once I'm done with, whether it's the first outline or the first draft, am I still excited with the story? Right? I think, like, my other example is, I think there was a time when I wrote, I actually like throughout, I deleted half of a story. After I had written it, I had deleted half the story because it just wasn't working for me. I also think that um, getting feedback is also a good way to get a sense of, are you staying true to the story? Are you staying consistent with the story? Um, Suppose that I read about a rule of thumb, right? So when you have a story, try to have uh, people you trust in terms of giving you feedback. Is it your fellow classmates? Is it a teacher? Is it another writer? The rule of thumb that I read a long time ago was, if you ask 10 people if there's something wrong with your story, if 9 out of 10 people say there's something wrong with your story is boring, it's not exciting, listen to them, right? But if 9 out of 10 people tell you how to fix your story, don't listen to them, right? So because they will start bringing in they would start saying, this is how I would write it, but they're not you, right? You need to tell it your own way. So listen to what people have to say about it, but you don't have to necessarily do everything that they're saying, right? And this is the same principle being used by Pixar. What makes Pixar movies so great is that they open it up to feedback. In when they are making and you might have read this, in the making of a Pixar movie, at a certain stage, when the movie is all storyboarded and the beginning, middle, and end is complete, they do what they call a brain trust, right? They put up that storyboard in a big venue. Sorry, they bring in everyone in the company, right? So it doesn't matter if it's like the president of the company or junior storyboard artist lang siya. They all come in, the director and the writer explains the whole story to everyone, and then everyone can give feedback. Doesn't matter what your rank is, you're ranked in that room, you're all storytellers. You're all the audience, right? And the director or the lead writer, his job is to listen, right? His job isn't to like, ay, ayaw niya tong scene na to, ay, pangit daw to. It's not that. It's just listen to what people feel about your story. Some of them might have very specific comments about the story. So, like, for example, if you've watched Inside Out, the first movie had 5 characters. In the original script, because the writer wanted to base it on real life thoughts that go through people's mind, I think he wanted to introduce 12 characters, right, in the show. And eventually it happens, right, in Inside Out 2, where they introduced like, what was it, like 4 more characters, right? And that's where anxiety came in. But yeah, the point is that it was during that feedback session that one of them just said, isn't 12 too much? Maybe you should pick. And they didn't say, alam mo, mas maganda si Joy tsaka si Sadness, yan yung main characters. So they didn't say that. They just said, parang ang dami ng 12. Baka ano feeling mo dyan, right? So but yeah, that's an example of like, listen to what other storytellers have to say about your story, but then you decide, right? You decide on like, I still think this is best for my story, but then at least you now have initial feedback on what what people think about it. Other writers, they have a trusted editor, for example, someone who's done story has been editing stories for the longest time, and therefore that's like a really you get very good feedback from somebody like that.
Thank you po, sir.
Geroche. Ay, sorry. You may now ask your question.
Rinig po ba ako?
Yep.
My question is po like as a person who want or keep making like new or introduce like something new. Like for example, based on aesthetics or like how it looks. Paano nyo po like na-overcome yung parang pressure or like fear of like showing that specific like piece to the public? I mean, don't get me wrong na diverse naman po yung audiences these days, but of course meron pa rin like madami na they will like parang the fear of like being turned down and stuff. Paano niyo po like na-overcome yung part na yun since you did mention po na at first it's a struggle to introduce like something new before Trece was made. Yun lang po, sir.
Super good question, Akim. How do you overcome that fear essentially your fear of rejection and getting that negative feedback, right? I think you don't. I think that's if there's one thing about being overconfident. I think it's a you need a balance of being confident with your work, um, but still being open to other people's opinion, right? I think, and I felt that when Trece first came out, um, and this was just the first couple of issues, right? Maybe like first two issues, and like I put it online, and there were some people who the initial feedback, as usual, you know how cruel the internet can be, but the initial feedback was, "Hey, ginaya mo lang Hellboy eh." Parang John Constantine lang yan eh. And yeah, and it's like you say thank you for your comment, bye bye, right? This might not be the story for you, right? You enter a bookstore, you open up Netflix, right? You don't buy every single book, or even if you could buy every single book, you're not gonna like all of them, right? You open up Netflix, it takes you hours trying to figure out what to watch. Not every story is going to be for that audience, right? I think um, write the story for yourself first, right? This is the story I want to tell, right? The Kajo, if Kajo were here, he would say he draws the story to when he draws the story, he wants to remain excited to draw this. And then he said, and my first test is may excite kaya si budget dito. And I'm the same, right? When I write a script, I'm thinking, what will Kajo have fun drawing, right? What has he not drawn? What does he want to draw, right? And then I try and find a way to put that in the script. Like one of our stories from book 8 was like it was set in a virtual what do you call this online game world, which allowed Kajo to draw a Gundam mech in the story, right? And he's a Gundam fan. But yeah, going back to the point of your first audience is yourself, um, and trust that there is somebody out there who is the audience for your story, because you can't please everybody, right? You are only so lucky if you have uh, the blockbuster hit that everyone wants to see, will love and everyone will rave about. Yes, that happens. We've all seen that happen. But if that's what you're thinking about, then you're never going to get your story out there because you'll always be worried. Nako, paano kaya kung di nila magustuhan to? Nako, paano kaya kung sabihin nila pangit to? Let them say that because out of the 9 people who says, pangit yan eh. There's going to be one person who will go to you and say, I read your story. Thank you very much. That's the story I needed to read today. So just keep writing.
So, for the last question po, I see a lot of people are curious and is asking this one. Kailan daw po or will there ever be a second season of the animated series of 13 in Netflix?
There is no official word from Netflix, so please do keep watching it. Tell Netflix you want a season 2. We're still working with Tanya. Tanya and Shanti are also doing a lot of other projects for Netflix, so it's good. I mean, I feel it's good to know that they are that they have produced more movies with Netflix. So they're in constant contact with Netflix, but right now I guess Netflix is looking for something else as far as anime is concerned. Mahirap na tapatan ng K-pop Demon Hunters. Di ko alam kung kailangan maging musical ang 13. Tingnan natin, di ko alam. But yeah, I mean, Tanya and Shanti still love 13 and would love to find a way to get season 2 going some way somehow. So yes, please do keep telling other people about it, and hopefully Netflix will notice that more people are watching it again.
Yes, we will po sir. Mag-i-start kami ng petition for that.
Thank you very much.
So, that concludes yung question and answer portion natin. Thank you Sir Tan for answering their questions, and sa mga participants natin, thank you guys for actively participating during that question and answer portion. Now, let's proceed na sa next flow ng program natin. And it is the presentation of certificate to our guest speaker, Mr. Budgettan, in recognition of his time, knowledge, and invaluable contribution to today's seminar. So to read the citation of the certificate, may I call on Miss Ana Reyes.
Hello po. All right. Once again, thank you so much for your time, Mr. Budgetan. Just to add, I'm a big fan of your work, and I'm sure everyone absolutely loved your presentation po. Like, ano po kasi, you can really see that everyone is really engaged with your talk, especially in the comment section po. It's really admiring seeing the passion within your craft. I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say that you truly are a great inspiration and a great role model for us. My favorite part po sa Trece is how you made the comic revolve around Filipino folklore. I remember watching Trece for the very first time, and I was excited to see si si Tikbalang, tapos yung Tiyanak, tapos si Nuno po, ganun. Yeah. So it's inspiring seeing our culture be illustrated. So with that being said, we'd like to show you um, a certificate of appreciation awarded to you, Mr. Budgetan, for your invaluable contribution as guest speaker in the webinar series Creative Pathways, a multimedia arts seminar series. With your insightful talk titled Turning Passion into Creation, a Career in Comics and Creative Writing. Your expertise, passion, and dedication in sharing your knowledge have greatly inspired and enriched the learning experience of our participants. Your contribution has significantly deepened our understanding of comics creative writing. So, yun nga again, thank you so much, Mr. Budgetan. All right, so you can take it away, Jiro.
Thank you, Miss Ana Reyes, for that wonderful citation for the certificate. Now, as we conclude today's webinar, we hope that everyone learned valuable lessons and gained inspiration from our discussion on creativity, storytelling, and pursuing one's passion. Thank you once again to our guest speaker, organizers, faculty members, and participants for making this seminar a success. Maraming salamat po sa lahat ng pumunta rito. Sir Tan, thank you so much po talaga for accepting this seminar po and sharing us a bit of you. So,
Thank,
everyone,
I just
okay
wanted
sir, go ahead po.
thank you for the patience and thank you sa pangungulit at mabagal ako mag-reply sa email but super happy that I got to finally do this and really awesome questions from everyone today. Thank you so much.
Thank you po sir. Salamat po. So everyone, before leaving the meeting po, sa mga participants natin to, you can scan the QR code or click this link that I will send sa chat box natin. It will be flashed on your screens. Ito po yung para ma-access niyo yung attendance and e-certificate claim form po natin. So, ayan, wait lang. Send ko dito guys. So, thank you everyone. Maraming salamat po for attending and I hope you have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you guys. Thank you Sir Tan.
Thank
Maraming
you.
salamat po.
Thank you. Bye. Have a nice day,
Bye sir.
everyone.
Take care po.
Bye-bye, sir. Hintayin ko lang
Bye
yung...
po, sir. Thank you po.
Scan nyo guys yung QR code.
Hintayin
Answer sa Google form, ano yun, attendance yun and certificate. Pwede nyo gamitin yun. Thank you ulit guys. Bye-bye.